stocks, bonds, everything combined is smaller than real estate. But what's interesting is, and there's massive turnover. There's $1.4 trillion of turnover, but it's super inefficient. In other words, when you look at Zillow, when you look at Trulia, you see offers, and it's very unclear where the bid is. And maybe it's 20% lower, maybe it's 10% lower. Always there's a negotiation. There's a lot of transaction costs involved. There is all kinds of insurance to make sure that there are no liens on the house that you have to buy. And so we basically want to eliminate all this. The platform actually has, the Atlant platform actually has two components. One is tokenized ownership, one is P2P rentals. Essentially, tokenized ownership is kind of what I was referring to earlier. Essentially, you can potentially own a part of a house or a part of a factory, a part of any sort of structure that's yielding. Why would you want to do this? Think about, for instance, the REIT market. People used to just outright own real estate. In the 60s in the US, they invented REITs. And so people said, well, what's sort of the point of this? But the point is that it makes real estate liquid. You can buy a piece of real estate and then hold it for some time and then receive a yield. And after a while, when you don't want to hold it, you can sell it. And also there can be specifics. So you can have, for instance, a REIT of hospitals. And if you believe that hospitals will do well, you own this basket of hospitals inside of a stock. And essentially, it goes up or down based on how well the hospitals do, plus they pay you yield. Or you can own a REIT of skyscrapers or what have you. Yeah? So the only problem with REITs is that they cost a heck of a lot to list. So to list on the New York Stock Exchange, the fees alone eat up million plus per year for filings, et cetera. And so this is why REITs are massive. You have hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate inside of any REIT. With this platform, you can actually, in essence, have a REIT of one asset. So you can have basically a structure. What you do is you look at the structure. It's cleaned of all debts. Basically, local authority makes sure that there are no liens, that the asset owner owns, indeed this property, and then they just want to sell it. Subsequently, you create a shell company, an SPV company, and the asset gets placed in this SPV company. And this SPV gets tokenized. I'll show the process a bit later. And afterwards, these tokens can trade on an exchange. And so to buy a piece of this, you don't need to go to a lawyer. You don't need a notary. You don't need to live in the same country. You don't need to understand even the language of this country or of the country where the asset is in. You can simply, it trades on the exchange like a stock on the platform Atlant. And so basically, you look at all the various assets that are traded there. And let's say you can be a guy sitting in China, and you want to buy an asset which is a factory in I don't know, Munich, yeah. And you only have $10,000. You can't really buy a factory. But you can basically say, okay, I want to buy $10,000 of this factory. And all you do is you click, lift an offer, and now you're long, basically, a chunk of a factory. And the factory pays a certain amount, per year. Basically, the company redistributes this money to all the token holders. So you receive some yield from this factory. And then afterwards, when you don't want to own this factory anymore, maybe 2 weeks down the road, you sell the factory, you hit the bid, and you no longer own the factory. And you essentially, for the duration of 2 weeks, own the piece of a factory without signing a single contract by just basically trading on the platform. Quick ideas as to why this is interesting. You have assurance that everything is checked. You don't need to check yourself whether there are liens on this factory. You don't need to check whether the owner is trying to trick you and whether they own it. It's like a stock. When something is listed on NASDAQ, you know that it's a legitimate stock. It might go up or down, right? But you understand that if you buy it, you're buying a piece of a particular company. You have price discovery because at any given day there are bids and offers on the screen. Just to give a quick example, it could be, for instance, 1 millimeter is 1 token, right, or something like this. So even if a small fraction of tokens trade per day, you understand exactly, it's transparent how much the property is worth. So unlike Zillow or Trulia, where you have an offer and you don't really know where people are going to buy it, you know where they want to sell it. Now, accessibility, liquidity is obvious. You can buy from any part in the world. One example I was just giving before. You have a ton of money tied up, for instance, in China. There are guys who can't get money out. They have capital controls. $50,000 is the most you can sort of take out per year. And so people find all these kind of tricky ways to get money out. And then eventually, I mean, they tend to like real estate, so they buy real estate. Here, you know, something like 80% of Bitcoin is mined in China. And so you can basically take your Bitcoin and with it buy a token traded on that Atlant platform, and now you long real estate. No capital controls, and no sort of constraints. Basically, everything is on the distributed ledger. Everything is immutable. No transaction between two counterparties can be disputed. So this is kind of a snapshot. It's being changed a little bit. In a couple of weeks, we'll basically come out with a platform, pre-ICO, hopefully, where you can log into your personal cabinet. You'll see multiple. I mean, right now they're mock assets, but you can actually. I mean, you'll have robots trading against you, and you can actually trade around. This is what a trading screen for a real estate asset would look like. So basically, you have, the size, price, bid and ask, and sort of the regular things you see on the trading screen. So hopefully, I mean, inside of a couple of weeks, we should have this working. So the other sort of part of the platform that we're creating sounds ambitious, but it's an Airbnb, Booking, and Expedia killer. And the way that this works is actually the same way as Airbnb Booking, but we improve the fees. Airbnb is notorious for charging massive fees. So they charge from the lessor, from the renter and from the rentee, they charge 30%, which is irrespective of how long you stay. And Booking.com basically is the same, unless you're, Marriott or, some kind of, Sheraton, they'll charge you less. But if you're sort of a boutique hotel, it's 25-ish% or 30%, and obviously the hotel passes that on to the host. And so the idea is, why is it so expensive? It's such a massive industry. You have tons of competition. Why must you pay 30% to stay in the room? The answer is quite simple. If you look at the Airbnb structure, they have over 4,000, actually close to 5,000 now people doing contract intermediation. And what that means is, you want to stay in a particular room. You look at the picture. It looks nice. You show up. It doesn't look like the picture. Yeah. So, and you say, well, this guy just, took a picture of Google. I don't want to stay here. Yeah. And so you email them or you call them. It usually takes a very long time because, I mean, they're somewhat incentivized to provide good service. But the physical guy who's actually helping you, he's just a salaryman. Yeah. So he doesn't necessarily, have to care about you so much. But he sits on a desk. The desk costs Airbnb money. He, has pension, he has benefits, he has, sort of all these things. When there are, holidays, obviously he's busy. When there are no holidays, he might be sitting there without conflicts to resolve. But Airbnb keeps on paying him, and that's why the fees are so high. That's why they're 30%. So with us, we used a system that's integrated into, so basically we took a system from BitSquare and a system that's used in OpenBazaar. Some of you guys might know this. So OpenBazaar is basically like decentralized eBay, and BitSquare is an exchange, a completely decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And I'll explain a bit later. So, but the conflict resolution system, these two platforms, completely eliminates this staff. So essentially, the guys who sit there and eat up money to sort of resolve your conflicts, we bring them externally. I'll bring this up later. But let me just explain, not in my words, but in Goldman Sachs' words. Essentially, what they're saying is, if Airbnb uses blockchain technology, their growth will be substantially higher. Here you have U.S. total occupied rooms. It's basically double projected out of 2020 with blockchain. So same here. I mean, I'll try to go over these slides quickly. It's too many numbers, but essentially you see 60% growth in RevPAR versus 30 without the blockchain. This is Goldman's numbers projected out for Airbnb. Again, you see Airbnb blowing out the charts. They keep on growing, and so we just want to take a part of their market. I wanted to explain a little bit the contract intermediation. So how does this work? So again, you show up to this room. You don't like the room. How do we differ from Airbnb, and why is it cheaper? So what we have is, so a token holder of the Atlant platform can potentially earn some extra money by being this intermediator. So he says, OK, I want to be an arbiter. Please show me, sort of situations that I can arbiter. And so let's say you have two people. One shows up. One says the room is great, and one says, no, I don't want to stay in your room. Each one puts some tokens in escrow. So the renter, the rentee, and the arbiter put some tokens in escrow. And this is similar to Airbnb. They block some money on your card, essentially. So what happens subsequently is that the arbiter, the guy in the middle, he looks at the situation and says, well, OK, maybe the tenant's right. Or maybe the lessor is right. And he gets money from the escrow of the other person. So in other words, in Airbnb, inside of the 30% fee is the payment for the arbitrator, sitting there, right? Here, only if there is some kind of a conflict, only if there's some kind of an issue, basically you take money from one, the lessor or the tenant. And so the idea is the amount of fees you charge actually for an apartment for this platform reduces substantially. It reduces, we project it out, it reduces about 10 times. So you can charge, instead of 30%, you can charge 3 to 5%. And then the question I get asked often is, this arbiter is just some random holder of your ATL token. Why, what if they go rogue, or they just randomly decide that one guy is, has a, I don't know, gray hair and he's right, or blue eyes or something like this. Or he colludes with one of the renter or the rentee. So the answer there is simple. He already, to participate in the system, he put in money into escrow. And so if one of the sides complains and says, look, I think this guy's colluding with, with the renter or with the rentee, a super arbiter, which is another arbiter that has just done many resolutions and has, a higher point score, then looks at a tri-person situation and says, OK, here's 3 guys, one of them intermediary, and he made this decision. If the decision is accurate, he basically, just earns a point and goes away. If the decision is not accurate, the arbiter loses his escrow. And so to play the game, the arbiter basically has to put up this escrow. Now, this is not a problem, because if the arbiter doesn't want to work anymore, he just presses a button and his escrow just is returned. And so this way, this sounds a little bit convoluted, but the system clearly works in 2 platforms and works well. I don't want to make this too long, but just a few words about technology. We have 2 parts to this. Everything is on the Ethereum network. But there are some things that the Ethereum network basically cannot store. So for instance, this arbitration system, which I have described, is stored on our own nodes. And contract management, identity, reputation, et cetera, secure workflow is stored in our own nodes. But basically, it's hashed to the Ethereum network. So you cannot just go and change this arbitrarily. If you try to change this arbitrarily, the hash will not work. And so it's as secure as the Ethereum network is. Then in terms of some of the, if you will, interesting kind of frills, and this goes for both the rental side and the property tokenization, human beings have to work with this. Everything is built on smart contracts, but programmers only understand smart contracts, right? So for instance, when you sign a rental agreement, or when you sign, if there's a tokenization event and you participated, or if you bought a small piece of a property, everything is done within the framework of a smart contract. But here, we have something called Ricardian contracts. And Ricardian contract is basically, it looks like a lawyer-esque document. It's tough to read, but you can understand what it's saying. And it kind of compiles into a smart contract, which is machine executable and essentially cannot be changed, and works for multiple parties and resolve things in the way they should be. This is kind of how tokenization works. Again, you have the property, approved law firm, gets it done, sort of approves it, gets put into a shell, and then subsequently traded within basically the framework of the Atlant network. What have you done so far? We've put together, so basically you see the ICO is coming around just very shortly in September 7th. We've basically put together, I would say, about half of the system. The alpha works. We're going to put it out inside of a couple of weeks. And you'll basically be able to play around with it, log in, try to trade mock assets, try to sort of P2P rent mock assets. Live The live system hopefully will be around March of next year, where we'll actually start. We're trying to get some letters of intent currently from property developers to try to show a proof of concept so we can tokenize a real asset. And I mean, P2P is going to be a little bit easier to get going first. But in and around those dates, we'll have some live examples. Ambitious goals out to 2024. I hope they happen. That's why there's a plus there. So quickly about the team. That's a better picture of me. But so I worked on Wall Street. Most of my life I worked in hedge funds. I mean, some of the guys here know me on the buy side. Then I switched to the sell side. Was structuring derivatives a little bit. Neil's on the team. He's had a decent amount of experience also on Wall Street, mainly focusing on Asia. Dennis is our CTO. Very young guy, but a key part of our team. He's put together 2 exchanges that are functioning right now. Trading Ethereum, trading Litecoin, Bitcoin, etc. I mean, you can log in. If you pass the KYC of the exchange, you can actually trade it. I mean, I can show you the exchange. It looks quite nice. And he's assembled a team of guys that basically are putting together this product. These guys have been together for 5 years. It's a team that's been assembled over some time. And the product, frankly, is being put together quicker than I had imagined because we're taking parts of code from other things that we've written. So, I mean, these guys have put together half a dozen of smart contracts for other, for their teams. Here are advisors. The advisors are, exceptional, especially in the space. Greg Thane basically founded Knight Frank in Russia, which is quite a feat. I mean, he came there quite early, and now, I mean, he left, but he's now kind of developing real estate all over the world, in Dubai and Indonesia, sort of all over the place. So we're hoping that Greg will find us actually the first asset to tokenize to try to see how this works. Natalia Tischendorf, she's also, I mean, she's now working at a $2 billion real estate fund, and over her life, personally, she has, successfully made transactions over $2 billion in real estate, and worked for, I believe, 12 or 15 years in Jones LaSalle. These are 2 of our lawyers. On the right, the guy is from California, and he basically put together an opinion that we are not a security as per US regulations. The gentleman on the left is doing the same for Europe. Not a lot of ICOs are getting a legal opinion in Europe, but we're just being extra cautious. We're thinking that maybe if UK separates from EU, maybe EU will follow US's footsteps. So we're just trying to be careful. Some more advisors. The guy on the left actually used to be my ex-boss, and he's helping. He's helped look at some of the models. And Joe is sort of our Chinese connection. He's a real-life astrophysicist from MIT. He runs a blockchain company in Hong Kong now. If you guys have some questions, maybe.
I got one. How dependent are you on Ethereum as a chain if it were to eventually go away, or if it were to fork, or if it were to be replaced by Ethereum 2.0 or Classic or something? Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the detailed answer probably would be as per my CTO, but the short answer that I can give you is that essentially we could build our own chain and completely do everything ourselves, but we're not naive enough to believe that everyone's just going to go and run our nodes. And so essentially we plug into the Ethereum network, which has existed for a while, which is a strong blockchain, which is sort of, cannot be hacked with the 51% rule. Eventually if we get big enough, we can separate from it. We can plug into another blockchain. But I mean, we need a blockchain that has smart contracts. So I mean, the smart contract functionality is essentially, on the Ethereum side.
So who's your ideal kind of token holder? Is it more on the institution side, or is it the consumer, who wants to just kind of a small position and invest in this rather than in a REIT?
The institutions hold ICOs.
Institutions are starting to hold ICOs. You'd be surprised.
I mean, I'm talking sort of long term, not necessarily.
So,
I don't expect a lot of institutions.
I mean, sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I mean, frankly, we're agnostic as to the holders, but we have, so there's several components to this, right? So there's a platform which we are ICOing right now. So the platform, essentially, as a token holder of Atlant, what do you get, right? When there are, so I mean, Airbnb, one of my investors actually commented this, so I really love this phrase. You know, Airbnb is the biggest hotel without hotels, right? So this is kind of the same. So the more hotels get rented, the more basically income the system receives, and this gets distributed to ATL token holders. Right? Number one. Number two, this kind of looks like a bit of an investment bank plus plus an exchange. So for instance, if there is a tokenization event that happens, so and what that means is, you know, someone comes and says, look, you know, I want to sell this, you know, townhouse. Can you please sell me this townhouse? We tokenize the house, you know, we go through the whole process. We tokenize the townhouse, and then subsequently it starts trading. But we don't do this for free. Yeah, so similar to an investment bank, when they list a company, they do it turnkey, right? You know, you just come in and you say, look, you know, I make projectors, you know, I don't know anything about, you know, listing companies. You know, please do this for me. I want to get more money from my company. So we also do, you know, act the same way. We take an asset, a real estate asset. We basically do the advertising. We do the tokenization. We put it in the wrapper. Everything is turnkey, but we keep a small part, right? So, you know, iBanks tend to keep, you know, 3 to 5%, and we distribute it also to the ATL token holders. So this is one component. But further down the road, you will have basically a basket of these sort of ATL daughters, if you want to, you know, call them that, right? So these sort of tokenized properties, and you get a very different. So with the first one, I mean, you kind of taking more risk on one hand, but you're getting more reward because the more tokenizations and the more sort of P2P properties happen, the more you get, right? And it's, you know, as the first slide says, it's just such a massive industry that if we penetrate 0.00 something % of it, everyone's, you know, well off, right? The PTOs, we call, you know, property token offerings, essentially have a very different, you know, sort of price dynamic. It's very similar to owning a property, but I mean, it could also potentially be institutions, but it could you know, be very interesting for an individual because, so for instance, you have $10,000 and you, like I said, and you can't buy $1 million asset. You can buy $10,000 of it, right? And then, you know, you can sell it so you can participate in property.
So just to kind of give a little bit of context to my question, because, you know, I think from like the individual consumer side, if they've got the option of investing in a REIT, you know, you know, granted yes, they're paying much higher management fees than than buying a token, but they also get a lot of expertise. So they don't need to know about, you know, rents in Manhattan, what kind of supply there is, you know, what kind of projected growth rates. They just kind of invest their money in somebody else's engine. It's diversified, and, you know, how do you get people on board to buy these tokens when they have theoretically a lot of concentration risk if they're going to put it all into, you know, if they're going to invest in sort of individual tokens unless they, you know, put in a lot of work to diversify themselves, and then there's just kind of the, you know, the ability to kind of know about the markets that they're invested in. Like how do people become educated enough to buy these things and feel comfortable with it?
Well, the question is, I'll answer your question in the following way. There's many ways to slice and dice a cat, right? So if you buy a REIT, let's say it's, I don't know, like I said, you know, hospital REIT, something like this, right? So yeah, you're buying a whole bunch of distributed hospitals, and perhaps this is what you want. But what if you want to, you know, you like a particular area? I mean, real estate's after all about location. You like a particular area of your town. You think this area is not doing well right now, but it's going to do better. There is no REIT for this particular area. I mean, it's just, you know, the market's not that developed, right? And this is something you cannot do. And if you know that the hospitals in this area is in the hospital REIT, okay, great, but it's diluted by 50 other hospitals that are, you know, sort of in this network. And so, I mean, people buy real estate all the time. You know, whether for personal reasons or whether for sort of investment. And I would say, to answer your question, is when REITs came out, the question was, why would anyone touch this? I mean, I can just go and buy a house. I'm going to buy some shares of some company. Right now in the US, REITs are over $1 trillion in assets. So, I mean, I guess that might answer.
To follow up on this question, because I represent the basic consumer, I have no experience whatsoever in the financial markets whatsoever. For me, it's hard to understand that on one side, you have real estate, and virtual money. How you link up these two? Because I understand that you have to go through lawyers to assert that the property exists and it's clean of liens and everything. But do you have one asset now that is clear? And so basically my question is, if I buy a token, does it represent one little thing of that building? Or right now it represents nothing? And so what are you buying with this token? And can you exchange it dollars? I mean, that's kind of a basic consumer ask. What do I have with that?
So again,
because when a REIT, everybody can understand. You're buying a share of something. And then you can buy a share of one specific building. You can buy a share of one specific type of a building. Commercial, residential, but here I don't know what I'm buying. So I mean, I'm playing the devil's advocate here as a consumer.
So I mean, just to take also one step back. So right now, what is being ICO'd is a platform upon which these property token offerings will list and subsequently trade. But then to look at the actual property token offering, you know, when you say you understand what a REIT is, right? So it's basically a company which wraps in itself, let's say 100 different buildings of some kind of type, yeah? And you can buy a small piece of this company or a large piece of this company, right? So this is exactly the same, actually, except there's only one building inside this company, number one. And number two, the shell you can buy with cryptocurrency and not just fiat. But actually, furthermore, we have a sort of a plugin or a couple of plugins where you can actually exchange various different cryptocurrencies and fiat. So basically, if a tokenization event happens, you know, for instance, if someone is selling their, this is not from the consumer point of view, but if someone wants to tokenize their asset and sell it, they might say Ethereum. I don't want Ethereum. What is this? You know, virtual money, right? The Ethereum that they collect can be converted into basically fiat money, you know, via a few partners that we have. And vice versa. Or for instance, you know, if, you know, for the P2P platform, again, you know, we'd prefer everyone pay with cryptocurrency, but if someone doesn't want to accept it, that's fine. You want to take euros, that's fine. You want to take dollars. But to get back to your question, so very similar to a REIT. You have an asset there. It just is traded in a different currency. So it's not traded in dollars on a New York Stock Exchange. It's traded in its own tokens on our exchange and potentially other exchanges. But there is an actual legal link from your token to a square meter of this asset. So I mean, in other words, again, you know, I'll repeat. So basically, you have some property. You put it into a company, right? So that part everyone does. I mean, almost every wealthy person owns a property through a structure because it just optimizes taxes and, you know, that has a lot of other benefits. And then all you do is you basically take shares of this company and you tokenize them. So essentially, tokens represent shares, and then shares represent ownership in the only asset that this company has, and then you just draw a line from one to the other. So that's, I hope that answers your question.
I mean, let's say I want to tokenize a property or buy tokens of property based in China. I live in Europe. Which currency, if I want to liquidate my assets with you, which currency? I mean, if you want real money, how does it work? Quickly.
Well, so
another question. I have a property in New York. Can I sell my property for you?
Right now, no. Right now, the platform is still being developed. But eventually, yes. I'll answer your second question first. Yeah, eventually, yes. But we'll start with sort of larger properties just to show proof of concept. I mean, initially we set the cutoff at 20 million euros, but this is all DAO voting, you know, mechanism, so we can change the price. Well, I mean.
Potentially going into the residential real estate market. Like if I have a house that's worth $1 million,
So the only issue with doing that is, so putting things into an SPV still costs money, right? And so while it's substantially cheaper than listing a REIT, it still costs money. So if it depends on which jurisdiction the SPV is in. So I mean, we've looked at some examples in, for instance, in Luxembourg for European properties. I mean, we're talking about like, I mean, 15, 20 grand. Right, so it's not a substantial amount of money, and there's some upkeep every year to keep this going. But basically, you choose an SPV which is most tax efficient and plays well with where your asset physically is located. And furthermore, I mean, we talked to Deloitte and we talked to our lawyers, and they basically they've explained that in some various jurisdictions have sort of slightly different ways that tokenization can happen. So it depends on
What's the rationale behind the fact that you have both P2P rental and tokenization in the same platform? I mean, are there any synergies between the two activities, or is it just to keep on the two projects together?
I mean, the thing is, I mean, just per my CTO, a lot of the technology basically overlaps. I mean, all the nodes and some of the framework within them overlaps. In essence, yeah, there are two kind of separate entities. That being said, I mean, if you look at, for instance, Zillow, they have rentals and they have, properties that are for sale. It's just convenient, one-stop shop. You go for any sort of real estate need. I mean, furthermore, I mean, we were talking with you before. We're not advertising this as something that we can do right now, but once registers become fully sort of on the blockchain. I mean, country registers. So, I mean, right now, the country of Georgia has put their register on the blockchain. Bitfury helped them do this. Ukraine is doing the same. They put their registry on the blockchain. Some prefectures of Japan and I think parts of Chicago are now, kind of experimenting with putting things on the blockchain. So, but I mean, right now, this is kind of almost like copying, regular database on the blockchain, and they're not really using it. But once this really is used, and again, we don't have a use case right now, but once this is used, we hope to be the digital broker. So, and then, per your question, we can do this without the SPV. We can actually, plug things from, one place and, yeah. But right now, that's just not feasible, and this is why we stick to larger. We'll stick to larger assets. And
so it would almost be like refinancing your accounts. You wanted to say renovate, so you put it out there on these markets, residential list. You had enough of profits, $1 million or something.
Wouldn't say. I'm not sure. Okay.
So, as a consumer, on the consumer side, not the commercial real estate, but the residential real estate. So, could you potentially see this rolling down to a consumer level where someone could say, rather than going through a bank and refinancing through a bank and taking that cost, which isn't that much, but it can be. Do you see that cost coming down where they could actually, if they were sophisticated enough, put their own house on this and have a share? I
mean, eventually, potentially, but initially we plan to look at assets that are kind of, people would look at them as kind of, there are sort of yield-seeking investors who want to say, let's say, buy a shopping mall, right? And it has some forecastable yield, and this is essentially what you receive. I mean, down the road, hopefully we'll try to do this. Further down the road, also we will basically include some sort of loaning capacity and all these things. Right now, it's just too early to implement.
So is there a way for token owners to communicate with each other? So let's say I own, the office building, a part of the office building down the road, and I think the management company isn't doing a good job and we need to replace. So I want to propose we need to change that. Is there a way to communicate with everybody and validate that I'm only communicating with token holders, so that it kind of sort of remains, I guess, almost confidential in that way, or at least enclosed?
Well, I wouldn't say it's, so there is this capacity. I wouldn't say it's necessarily confidential, but what happens is if enough token holders within the framework of a particular property token offering say, you know what, we want to make some kind of change, or we want to, we have a rusty elevator and it squeaks and we want to change it, right? They put this idea up as for vote, right?
But and how does that communication happen? How do I, let's say I want to propose that. How do I do that? Is that something that's...
It's built into the platform. I mean, so basically, just to actually, I didn't talk about the platform. We have nodes, which it looks like a program. You run it, looks like an actual software program. Or you can have basically in your browser, you can have kind of capability to, it just connects to a node to sort of view the platform. And within that, you can basically propose some kind of a suggestion. And if other token holders within the framework of the same property token offering say, or I should say property, yeah, vote yes or no, then such a thing happens. So I mean, this is a classical application of what sort of happens in cryptocurrency. So, just recently you had Bitcoin split. This was put up for a vote. There was a lot of debate, and in the end, it split, right? So, something similar is possible here.
And would it be, so let's say I want to change the management company. Would it be up to me to say, not that I just want to replace the person, but replace the person with XYZ? Mm-hmm. Like, so I have to come up with a full proposal, like, right? I guess. I mean,
you would propose. I want to change the management company. You suggest one, someone else suggests a second one, third one, etc. A stack of management companies gets put together, and essentially.
But there's no way to communicate sort of before that. I mean, only if I'm putting something up for a vote. Does that make sense? Like, if I just kind of wanted to discuss, like, well, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. Are you happy with that? Is there a mechanism to communicate?
Right now, we don't have such a mechanism, but you can basically raise a proposal and vote. So, but, I mean, I suppose we can make some sort of but we don't have it right now. No. Yep, please.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have a great concept. You're like Airbnb, and all it's like you're disrupting the whole system to put shockwaves throughout the whole thing. I love disruptors. I love everything else. But I had to check with your advisors first before I asked this question. Because in New York City, we had tokens. Then came a Metro card, and it replaced the tokens. So the big Metro card that you have now is the day trading algorithms. How do you prevent the day traders who have all these algorithms from being part of the system and they trade on the penny on tokens and things like that?
Well, I mean, we welcome any investor. If somebody wants to day trade, whether it's Atlant platform or a particular token, it's fine. If somebody wants to be an investor and buy and hold, it's fine as well. We want more liquidity, so the more people are interested in the system, the more the better it is for everybody else. You have a more liquid. I mean, the whole idea of this to essentially take a very non-liquid asset class. I mean, usually people buy real estate, and then maybe they sell it 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, and before they don't even know what it costs, right? I mean, essentially, people assume that real estate only goes up, or they assume they can sell it for where they bought it. But sometimes it's the case, sometimes it's not. I mean, right now, New York real estate's on top. 10 years ago, it didn't look so much like that, right? So that's kind of the idea. But guys, if you want to, I prepare. I mean, literally just today we shot a very quick video of our offices. We have our developers sit in Moscow. We have quite a distributed team. So just so you can see actually where we sit and